What's going on, everybody? It's GameUnboxingReviews here, and welcome back to another LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2 video. So, to celebrate 15 years since MTV's Spider-Man the New Animated Series hit the small screen in 2003, in today's video I'm going to show you guys how to create Neil Patrick Harris's version of Peter Parker using the in-game customizer. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so the appearance. So, to start off with, you want to find Hawkeye's head. Now, obviously with all the new pieces, like for example Giant Man's head, you know, Ra's Malhotra, some of the pieces in the customizer, they're going to be in a different order, so you might have to look through them a little more than usual. But we can see right here, this is Hawkeye's head, and I think that one's pretty good, so that's the one that we're going to go with. Then once you've done that, you want to go to hair, and you want to find short tousled, which is this one right here, and you're going to make it dark brown, which matches the eyebrows. I think that one's pretty good for this version of Peter Parker. I think it's pretty accurate to, you know, how he looks in the actual show. And then once you've done that, you want to go to hands, both hands, and you want to match the same skin tone as the face, like so. There we go. Then once you've done that, you want to go to body. Now, the body is a DLC character, but I can't actually remember the name of the character, so I'll have to quickly look through them, but it won't take long. So it's not Cloak, it's someone similar though, that's a bit like Cloak. It's in that DLC pack, I believe, so you will need the Cloak and Dagger DLC pack to make my version of Peter Parker. I mean, you could always use another black piece, but I just thought this one was pretty good. So here it is. Yeah, Shroud. I think Shroud's torso is pretty good, so that's the one that I'm going to go with. But again, you know, if you don't have that DLC pack, you could always try and find something else to use instead. Now, the best part about this is the both arm pieces. So you're going to go into here, and you're going to scroll down until you find... where is it? This one here, Morbius. I love this because, you know, it's got the exact arms that he has, you know, from his clothes in the Spider-Man New Animated Series. It's perfect. This is why I decided to make Peter Parker out of everyone in this show, because I thought it turned out the best. You know, if I could make the Spider-Man suit from that show, I would, because it's awesome, but I couldn't. You know, it would just look like any old Spider-Man that's in this game already. But the Peter Parker, that actually looks pretty good, so I'm really glad these arms are in the game, and it looks a lot more accurate than other Peter Parkers that I've tried making. So once you've done that, all that's left to do for the appearance is basically just go to hips, scroll all the way to the top, go to this purple, and then do the same for the legs. Obviously, he's wearing shoes in the animated series, but there isn't a purple leg piece with shoes, so you're just going to have to go with that. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. Now, of course, what we want to do is move on to the fun part of the video, which is, of course, choosing the powers. So, for the abilities, let's see here. Passive is going to be pretty much the same as all the Spider-Man and symbiotes and things like that I've made in the past. So, what you want is wall climbing, techno access, no mind control, no magic, no deflect. Cracked Lego walls will have that. Fix-its, no vine cut, no time manipulation. Super strength will have that. No rune tracing, no portal create, tracking, and no dig. We don't want anything like that. Then, once you've done that, you want to go to square button, you want to go to tap, you want to have fighting. For hold, I would go with targeted lunge. For tap circle, I wouldn't give him anything there. I don't think anything's really necessary. And then for hold circle, again, I don't think there's anything in there that we really need. Alright, so now on to the X button. So for double tap, obviously you want to be able to web swing. The default choice should be this, but if it isn't, you know, just check it anyway, because obviously there's all these as well. But I think this one's the best, because it's the actual web. And of course, make sure it is also white. It should be default white, but just make sure anyway. So you want this white right here. There we go. Awesome. Alright, so we've done the abilities, now we can move on to the passive traits. So for the health icon, just go with red. For the health type, we'll go with standard. For the voice, just choose any male voice, I'll just go with voice 1. Movement speed, just go with default. And then for the target reticle, just choose this web, because obviously this is Spider-Man. Alright, cool, so now we just need to name him and choose a background image. So I'm just going to name him Peter Parker. Because obviously, you know, you can only put so much in the name, and Peter Parker's just nice and simple, so we'll just do that. Is it gonna appear before I type it? It has, but not in caps, and we need it in caps, obviously, because the game registers everything in caps. Alright, cool, Peter Parker. Now we can just choose a background image, and I'm just going to go with this one. You know, it's a city. I always choose that for the city characters, but it makes the most sense. I mean, you wouldn't see this version of Spider-Man in a jungle, because he never went to a jungle, so the city definitely works. Alright, cool. Now, of course, what we're going to do is drop Peter Parker into the Chronopolis HUB World and see just what he can do. And here he is. This is, of course, my custom-made Peter Parker from Spider-Man, the new animated series, made in LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2. Let's just get a good look at him right here. Looking very, very cool indeed. I've got to say, this is probably my favorite Peter Parker that I've made in LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2 so far, because it looks the most accurate to the source material. You know, with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Peters, I really had to kind of just improvise on the clothes and everything. But here, this really does look like the Neil Patrick Harris version of the character, which is really cool. So what can he do? Well, obviously he can attack objects, which we'll do in a second once we find some objects to attack. There we go. So he can do that. We can also beat up these defenseless snowmen like I do in every customizer video for this game. There we go. And of course he's also got this target lunge ability, which we'll do over here. Just hop over these objects. There we go. These two should do fine. There we go. See? He runs and he attacks, so that's pretty cool. And of course, while he is dressed as Peter Parker, he can still climb walls and web swing and all that good stuff. And seeing as how this video is to celebrate 15 years since Spider-Man the new animated series hit the small screen, I thought it would also be cool to make another character from the show as well. So this is of course Chikara. Now Chikara, I thought, you know, she didn't turn out as good as I was hoping, so that's why I'm not doing a separate video on her. Maybe I could have put in a bit more effort, but I still think she looks pretty cool. And if you've seen the show, then you know who this is. This is definitely my favorite of the original villains that they had in this show. But yeah, I think she looks pretty cool. Peter looks better, but it's still nice to have two characters from the show. Alright, cool. So now let's actually go fight some crime with these two. So while we're fighting crime and exploring the city of Chronopolis, let's actually talk about Spider-Man, the new animated series. So when this show first came out, I never actually knew this at the time, but the series was actually designed to follow the events of Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, which definitely makes a lot of sense. You know, Peter doesn't have web shooters in this show. You see the spider legs coming out of his thumb at one point, and I mean, Harry is always accusing Spider-Man of killing his dad, Norman, who is of course the Green Goblin in Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. However, I wouldn't exactly call this show canon, since everything that happens in the new animated series isn't even mentioned in Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3. So anyone that has seen the new animated series will know that it was a much more mature show compared to comic book TV shows at the time, which I definitely like. I mean, I would probably say that the show is much more appealing to me now as opposed to when it first came out, but it did have some very weird changes. Like, for example, you probably noticed a lack of Aunt May. Well, that was apparently because there were fears that an older character would put off the younger target audience. Now, I watched reruns of the 90s animated series growing up, and the sight of Aunt May never once made me want to turn the show off. And the same goes for Rosemary Harris as Aunt May in the first Spider-Man movie. So honestly, if you ask me, that is just a ridiculous excuse. But, you know, I believe you do see Uncle Ben, Aunt May, and Peter's parents in photographs in the show, so at least there's that. Now, Indy and Mary Jane were probably my favorite characters from the supporting cast of Spider-Man, the new animated series. And Mary Jane especially. I mean, I thought she was really well done in this show, and Lisa Loeb did a great job of voicing her. And as for Harry Osborn, I thought he was fine, but he looked completely different to the way I'm used to seeing Harry in other media. But of course, this show changed a lot, so really, that should have been expected. So the Peter Parker in this show was apparently designed to be less of a geek and more hip in order to fit with the network. And personally, I still think Neil Patrick Harris nailed being both a comedic and serious Spider-Man. Plus, he had a really cool suit that felt like a nice combination between the first Spider-Man movie suit and the Ultimate Spider-Man costume, what with the big expressive eyes. But I especially love how the webs on his suit would actually shine shine in the light. And that was, of course, down to the show using CGI, which was actually pretty impressive at the time. I mean, sure, they had their limits, but they still managed to make some awesome swinging and fight scenes with Spider-Man and his enemies. So one of the strangest and most interesting things about this show is that despite the fact that Spider-Man has arguably the best rogues gallery in comic books, the creators of the show decided to make their very own original villains. So instead of Black Cat, we got Talon. Instead of Rocket Racer, we got Turbojet. Chikara was apparently inspired by Elektra, and Pterodax was apparently inspired by the Vulture. The reason for which I have no idea, but I'm guessing maybe it's just because they can both fly. But in all seriousness, these villains were kinda hit or miss for me. I mean, I thought Talon was fine, but as I was sitting watching the episode, I just could not stop thinking about how easy it would be to literally just replace this character with Black Cat. I mean, there would be barely, if not any, change to the overall story of that episode if they just did that. But one villain that I did enjoy was Chikara, because despite the fact that she admired Spider-Man, she was still very determined to make him fight her to the death. And unlike Elektra, she actually had powers, those being telekinesis, and also the ability to perform a de-aging ritual with her sword, which I actually found to be pretty cool and different. Now, as well as the new villains, the show also introduced Silver Sable, Kraven the Hunter, Kingpin, the Lizard, and Electro. And as you can probably tell, these were definitely the best villains in the first and only series of Spider-Man, the new animated series. Now, I'm not sure if I've said it in the past, but I'm really not a fan of the 2003 Daredevil movie. I mean, I much prefer what Netflix is doing with the character right now. But of course, that was a very different time back then, and I have yet to actually watch the movie's director's cut, so I should probably give that a watch sometime. Now, despite the fact that I didn't like the movie, I absolutely loved Michael Clarke Duncan as Kingpin. I thought he did an amazing job as that character, so I was extremely happy to find out that he reprised his role for Spider-Man, the new animated series. And again, I thought he did a great job in this show as well. The only thing I found a little weird was nothing to do with his take on the character, but more how powerful his cane was, which isn't really a big deal, I guess, but I just prefer it when Kingpin is a more grounded and realistic character. Now, while my favorite villain in the show was Electro, who we'll get to in a little bit, my favorite episode was actually Law of the Jungle, which of course introduced Dr. Kurt Connors and his transformation into the Lizard. Now, while Connors was voiced by Rob Zombie, and this series was obviously many years before Mark Webb's movies, I found this take on Connors to be very similar to Rhys Ifans from The Amazing Spider-Man. In fact, the more I watched the episode, the more it made me think that the creators of that movie must have got inspiration from this very episode. I mean, we even see Harry chop off Lizard's fingers, which then grow back, similar to when Lizard's tail grew back in The Amazing Spider-Man. But of course, this could all just be a huge coincidence. So I thought Connors and Lizard were done really well in this show. I mean, I especially loved Lizard's design. But the only thing I didn't really like about this episode is the fact that the Lizard dies. I mean, I'm just not a huge fan of that happening, especially when it comes to animated shows, because it's always fun to see a villain make a return in a later episode or series. Now, I have to say that I absolutely love how this show handled the character of Max Dillon, and it was actually really cool to see him pop up in other episodes before his transformation. Honestly, this version of Max Dillon is exactly what we should have got in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because you really do feel sorry for him in this show. I mean, Max just wanted people to be his friend and hang out with him, but instead, they constantly bullied and played pranks on him, going as far to even blindfold and kidnap the poor guy. So when we get to the point where Max becomes Electro, it feels rewarding because we've seen him go through so much pain, and he is absolutely furious after being pranked once again. But instead of getting upset about it like he would previously, he takes all of that pain and anger and throws it right back at Doug, who I was actually surprised to see die in that very episode. So Max literally had no mercy for those that did him wrong. Now, when Electro returns in the episode When Sparks Fly, again, his only goal is for people to accept and like him, more Sally than anyone, because she was the only person to ever smile at him. And while it doesn't exactly go the right way about it, you can still definitely tell that Sally meant a great deal to Max Dillon. Overall, I can't get enough of this version of Electro. I just love the way he looks, sounds, and acts. He's just perfect in this show. Honestly, growing up, I actually found this version of the character kind of frightening, especially during the scenes where he would come alive in Sally's TV and call for her. I mean, that was pretty scary at the time, but now I just think that it's an awesome yet creepy take on Electro, and probably one of my favorite things about this show. And while we'll probably never get another series, if the show did continue, we would have apparently seen Mysterio, Vulture, and more of Kraven. So I guess it's safe to say that Peter would have returned to being Spider-Man, and seeing as how his suit was at the bottom of the river, it would have actually been cool to see him wear the human spider costume in the first episode of the second series, especially since, like I said at the beginning of the video, this show was designed to follow the events of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed making it. Stay tuned for lots more videos real soon, and as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe.